Allison Schrager for Bloomberg writes, how can an economy this good feel this bad? So, Paul, lay out for me, why is the economy good according to the numbers right now? I would agree. Like, the numbers are proving pretty solid for this economy right now, but what arguments does she lay out?
This has been really the issue for the last 5 years, Mike. We've talked about where the S&P 500 is up more than 140% from the end of the recession that we saw during that COVID range. We've got unemployment that has remained about 4.5% since 2021. You've had GDP growth for the Q2 of this year that just came in at 3.3%. You've had strong economic growth. You've
stock
had
market at
stock
continued all-time highs.
Really, really well. And you've had a labor market that particularly in 21-22 was the hottest it's ever been in terms of people job hopping. The argument could be made that some of wages were eaten up by inflation. We'll get to that in just a moment. But great labor market, great stock market, and GDP growth that has been quite strong as well. Those are all the positive economic indicators that you can point to in what's been a pretty good period, though it hasn't felt good the whole time.
Nonetheless, when you ask people via surveys how they feel about the economy, the answers are pretty overwhelmingly negative. And yes, it's partisan.
Yes.
But it's pretty negative regardless of political affiliation also. You had one survey recently that was 90% of Democrats responding negatively, 55% of Republicans responding negatively. Mm-hmm. And so to some degree, we've largely taken a look at these surveys over the course of the last few years and just had to put our hands down and say, I don't know if this matters anymore. Yeah. I don't know that these surveys really give us a representation of – it might give us a representation of how people feel, but clearly over the last few years has not given us any indication whatsoever of what people do.
Right.
And that's, if you're an investor, that's what you care about.
Money talks.
Am I so dour and negative on the economy that I'm going to stop going to restaurants? Am I so negative that I am going to – save a much larger percentage of my paycheck so that I don't get laid off? Those would be really indicative things about where the economy is going to go. And in spite of the way that everybody's responded to these things, it has meant nothing. Whether it's the Michigan Sentiment Survey that's been around since the 60s or a number of the ones that are mentioned here on, where was this one done? Conference Board was another one. The Wall Street Journal just did another survey. And again, all of this finding just not a lot of hiring, not a lot of outlook for the economy, and a real souring on the idea that the American dream still exists.
Right.
And that's pretty earth-shattering to me. On one way, in one specific way, I keep asking myself with this question, and Chuck's brought it up before too. If you could be born in any country in the world right now, for solely the prospects of economic mobility, mm-hmm. right? Like, if I'm going to be born into the lowest class of any country, where would I be born? And I really do hesitate to come up with a single country other than the United States that I would prefer.
I would too.
But clearly, with things like the cost of housing, clearly with job prospects for younger Americans and all sorts of other, inflation over the last several years, people are very, very negative on this economy. My problem still is I don't know what to do with that information.
No, ultimately, there has to be some proof that sentiment matches behavior, to your point earlier. Yeah. And it hasn't. The U.S. consumer has continued to get out there and spend. Maybe you can make the argument that it's really reflecting the bifurcation in the economy that we've talked about this stat before. More higher income Americans are more responsible for the consumer spending across this country.
The specific statistic that we've referred to more than once, and I should pull the source on it, but top 10% of income earners in the U.S. right now
50%
are accounting for 50% of total spending.
Right. So perhaps it is more a reflection of that the bigger numbers point to the consumer still spending, but perhaps that other 90% of income earners, maybe they aren't feeling as well or spending as well. But overall, the way that companies have performed, it's hard to make that claim entirely. And what we learned over the last 5 years is with inflation rearing its head, it is truly the one thing that upsets sentiment the most, I feel like. Outside of job loss, probably.
We've talked about this before, but I'll make this point that inflation affects these numbers really poorly because everyone responds to inflation.
Yeah, not everyone.
In the worst unemployment scenarios that we get, certainly, if I lose my job, I'm going to be way more negative on one of these surveys than I would be with 2022 inflation if I were still working. Like, you put yourself in that position, like, okay, it really sucks that all my prices have gone way up, but I do still have a job and I'm able to put food on the table for my family. The problem with how that all works out is in the worst recessions that we've been through, maybe 1 in 10 people has lost their job. So, that is the way that these surveys go. And frankly, it's just been a very long time since we've experienced a time period like this with price uncertainty like we've been delivered over the last 5 years.